Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah here. We're holding Mishnah Berurah Chelik Beis, and in Mitzvah Hashem, today we will complete Daf Nun Dalet Amud Beis and do a piece of Nun Hey Amud Aleph as well. We have quite a complex sugya that we have to work on today. It involves a major machlokes rishonim over how to understand a sugya in Masechtas Chulin. Not going to get really into the nitty-gritty of the sugya in Chulin. That's beyond the scope of our shir. But I will give you the background in the two shitas harishonim that we need to understand the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah that we'll be learning today. So, when we speak about Netillas Yadayim, and we speak about the amount of water that you need for Netillas Yadayim, we could really discuss the amount of water that you need in two different contexts. One is, how much water does the keli need to hold? The second one is, how much water actually has to reach your hands? And we're going to see that different rishonim have different answers to those questions. So the two major shitas rishonim that we're going to be discussing today is the Shitas HaRamban, V'siyatoi. It's not only the Ramban, it's the Ramban and others as well. And then there's Shitas Rashi, V'siyatoi. There's the Shita of Rashi and those who seem to learn like Rashi. According to the Ramban, you need a revius of mayim, and that means that you need a revius of mayim both in the keli, meaning you must have a keli that could be machzik a revius. You need a keli that could hold at least a revius of mayim, and there has to be a revius of mayim in that keli. And then when you wash the Netillas Yadayim, a minimum of a revius of mayim must hit your hands. So according to the Ramban, you need both. You need a keli that could hold a revius, and the keli has to have a revius in it. And then when you actually perform the Netillas Yadayim, you need a revius of mayim to reach your hands. Having said that, we're going to see that there is a kula in the Netillas Yadayim, and that is, we're going to see a halacha that if two people want to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, so now you've got four hands, and you've got one keli that could hold a revius of mayim, what you could do is the following. If you have three people, you have two people that want to wash the Netillas Yadayim, and then you have a third person who's available to pour the water. What we could do is, Reuven could put out his two hands, Shimon could put his two hands underneath Reuven's hands, and then Levi could take the keli that has the revius of mayim and pour it over Reuven's hands and Shimon's hands. So now you had a keli that could hold a revius. There was a revius of mayim in the keli. That revius of mayim was poured onto the four hands. Now what's the kula? Why do we need a kula here? The reason we need a kula is because if Shimon's hands are underneath Reuven's hands, then that means that a revius of mayim is not going to end up on Shimon's hands. Reuven's hands may get a revius of mayim. The entire revius that was in the kais will be poured over Reuven's hands, but a certain amount of water is going to remain on Reuven's hands. That water is not going to reach Shimon's hands. Now we said that according to the Ramban, you need a keli that can hold a revius. It has to be full. It needs a full revius, and you need a revius to reach the hands. Over here, a revius is not going to reach Shimon's hands. The answer is that there's a kula. There's a kula by the Netillas Yadayim that shiarei tahara could be matar. Since the keli did have a revius, and that revius of mayim was used to cause tahara, it was poured over Reuven's hands in an act to be matar Reuven's hands. The sharayim of that water, the water that goes through and over Reuven's hands and lands on Shimon's hands, has the koyach to bring tahara to his hands as well. That's Shitas Ramban. Then we have Shitas Rashi. Shitas Rashi disagrees with the Ramban in a very critical way. Rashi holds that for the Netillas Yadayim, you need a keli that can hold a revius. He agrees to the Ramban with that. The keli has to have a revius in it. He agrees with the Ramban in that. But where he disagrees with the Ramban is on the need for a revius of mayim to actually hit the hands. Rashi holds that that's not necessary. How much water do you need to make contact with the hands? The minimum amount of water necessary to flow over the entire hand that needs to be washed. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a revius. If you pour very carefully, you don't need a revius of mayim to go over the entire hand. So again, according to Rashi, it's true that you need a keli that can hold a revius, and it's true that you need a revius of mayim, but the revius of mayim does not have to come into contact with the hands. Why do you need a revius of mayim in the keli? The reason you need a revius of mayim in the keli is because since we're using this water to bring about tahara, the water has to have a din of a mikveh. How does a revius of mayim have a din of a mikveh? Well, we mentioned already previously that when it comes to tfilas kelim, if you have a revius of mayim, you could toivel a tiny keli in a revius of mayim. So a revius of mayim is something that already has epis din of mikveh. It's a volume of water that could bring about tahara. So says Rashi, for the Netillas Yadayim, we need a keli that can hold a revius, and we need a revius of mayim. But does the revius of mayim have to come into contact with the hands? No, it doesn't. Now, why does this matter? So I'll give you a heads up. Here in Sif Gimel, we're going to see the Mechaber bring down two different opinions when it comes to two people washing Netillas Yadayim at the same time. First, we're going to have the first shita that's brought down in the Mechaber. And that's going to be based on the Shita Saramban. The first Shita that we're going to have over here in the Shulchan Aruch is going to say that when two people want to wash at the same time, they really have to wash at the same time. What does that mean that they have to wash at the same time? It means, in our scenario of Reuven, Shimon, and Levi, where Levi is going to pour the water over the hands of Reuven and Shimon, it has to be that there's a kavana. Reuven and Shimon both have kavana to accomplish the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, and Levi pours the water over Shimon and Levi's hands at the same time. By doing that, what we have is both Shimon and Levi are washing from a keli that had a revius. They're both using a revius of mayim. It's just as a kula that even though a revius of mayim in totality doesn't come into contact with Shimon's hands, we have a kula that when two people wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, Shiyare Tara could bring Tahara to Shimon's hands. But it's got to be done at the same time. Levi has got to pour a whole revius on Reuven's hands and Shimon's hands at the same time. And there's another piece to why this works. And that is, since all of the water is connected, right? The water in the cup, Levi starts to pour. The water in the cup is connected through the stream. The stream hits Reuven's hands. Now it hits Shimon's hands. Even Shimon, we look at it that Shimon is washing with the revius. That's the first opinion in the Mechaber. Then we have a second opinion in the Mechaber that's based on Shitas Rashi. The second opinion says an even bigger chiddush. The second opinion says, If you have a kais that has a revius in it, 2 people could wash the Netillas Yadayim from that kais, one after the other. How do you do that? Reuven comes, he takes the kais, he pours very carefully on one hand, and we're going to see he has to pour twice on that hand, and then he pours very carefully twice on the other hand, and he uses the minimum amount of water that he can, because he doesn't, according to Rashi, he doesn't need to use a revius. Then he gives the kais to Shimon, and Shimon goes and washes his right hand twice and his left hand twice with the minimal amount of water. They're both Yaitz and Netillas Yadayim according to Rashi, because according to Rashi, you don't need a revius of water to come into contact with the hands. How does this kula work? How is Shimon washing Netillas Yadayim from a keli that doesn't have a revius? When Reuven washed Netillas Yadayim, he had a full keli. When Reuven picked up the kais to wash Netillas Yadayim, he had a Netillas Yadayim cup with a revius of water in it. But when Shimon picks it up, it doesn't have a revius anymore. Reuven already used half the water. So according to Rashi, how does that work? So Rashi says that since the water that's left in the cup is shiare tara, meaning you pour the revius of mayim into a cup, so you established a mikveh, you have the sheer mikveh in the cup. Okay, once you have a sheer mikveh in the cup, so it already has the kayach to bring about tahara, you could do one after the other. Even when Shimon washes, it's shiare tahara. What does that mean? It comes from a cup that had a mikveh. You're right, it doesn't anymore, but even Reuven, when Reuven first picks up the cup, it has a revius. Once he pours once on his right hand, it doesn't have a revius anymore. So how does that work? He's washing the Netillas Yadayim from a cup that doesn't have a revius. Since it had a revius in the beginning, it already had the kayach to bring about tahara. That kayach lasts, even though by the time Reuven finishes, it doesn't have a sheer revius anymore. Says Rashi, okay, it also works for Shimon, but only if it's one after the other. Not if Reuven washes and then Shimon comes an hour later. If Shimon comes an hour later, then already all bets are off. So this is a synopsis of what we're going to see here today. Unless I figure out how to speak a little bit softer, there's no way I'm going to make it through. So we're going to try. All right. Non Daled Amud Beis, 4 lines from the top. Siman Kuf Samach Sif Yud Gimel. Says the Mechaber. Tzarech sheyehei b'mayim revius. You need to have a revius of mayim in order to wash the Netillas Yadayim. Says the Mechaber. V'hani mili le'echad. That's true by one person. For one person, you need a revius of mayim. Aval l'shnayim shabo lito ke'echad. But if 2 people want to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, ha'achron einoi tzarech. The second one does not need a revius. What does the Mechaber mean? What the Mechaber means is, for one person, you need a revius. And not only do you need a revius, but when one person comes to wash the Netillas Yadayim, you need a kais that has a revius in it, and that person has to pour the entire revius over his hands, because you need a revius of mayim to come into contact with the hands. But that's only by one person. If 2 people want to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, then says the Mechaber, ha'achrein einoi tzarech. The second person, Shimon in our case, does not need a revius of mayim to hit his hands. Because remember, Reuven is going to pour the water, or Levi is going to pour the water over Reuven's hands. A certain amount of water is going to stay on Reuven's hands. And since there was only an exact revius in the cup, Shimon is not going to get a revius on his hands. So again, let's read it inside and see how you have to teach this. Tzarech sheyehei b'mayim revius. How much water do you need for the Netillas Yadayim? Says the Mechaber, a revius. And an entire revius needs to hit the person's hands. But, says the Mechaber, v'hani mila le'echad. That's only when one person is coming to wash the Netillas Yadayim from this cup that has a revius in it. Aval l'shnayim shebo lital ke'echad. But if two people want to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, ha'achroin, the second one, Shimon, einoi tzarech. He doesn't need a revius to hit his hands. Continues the Mechaber, va'afilu pazeh achar zeh. And this works even if Reuven and Shimon put out their hands one after the other. I said that very carefully. The Mechaber over here does not mean that Reuven is going to wash first and then Shimon is going to wash. According to the Ramban, that would not work. Shimon would not be Yotzei Netillas Yadayim, according to the Ramban. What the Mechaber means over here is Bazeh Achar Zeh. He means Levi is holding the cup to pour the water. Even if Reuven sticks out his hands, Levi starts to pour. And it's only after Levi starts to pour that Shimon puts out his hands. Even so, Reuven and Shimon could both be Yotzei Netillas Yadayim. Continues the Mechaber, Ubelvad, with the caveat, Shelo yafsek hakiluach, that by the time Shimon puts out his hands, Shimon must put out his hand while Levi is still pouring from the keli. But if Levi finished pouring from the keli and then Shimon sticks out his hands, then Shimon is not going to be Yotzei. And I think the reason for this is, again, because according to the Ramban, that you need a revius, one of the reasons this kula works is because even Shimon is seen as having washed with the revius, because even the water that remains on Reuven's hands, it's all connected. The water that hits Shimon's hands is connected to the water that's on Reuven's hands, which is connected to the water in the keli. So even Shimon is seen as having washed with an entire revius. So again, the first opinion here of the Mechaber, which is the Shitas Ramban, you need a revius. When do you need that a full revius should hit the hands? That's only when one person is washing. If two people want to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, the second person, Shimon, does not need a revius to hit his hands. And yet, he's still Yotzei Netillas Yadayim, because since all the water is connected, and it's shiarei tahara, we say that it even works for Shimon. Now, the Mechaber takes the unusual step, perhaps because this is so complex, to illustrate the scenario very carefully. Says the Mechaber, Ketzad. How is this going to work? Haya revius mayim bakeli. You had a revius of mayim in a keli. Upashat echad yadav. And one person, Reuven, stuck out his hands. Va'acher, and another person, Levi, yotzek al yadav, is pouring the water over Reuven's hands. Ubasheni, and a second person comes, Shimon, upashat yadav, and stretches out his hands, lemata mimenu, underneath Reuven's hands, samuch lidei rishon, close to the first person's hands, close to Reuven's hands. V'kiluach, and the flow of water from the cup, yored al yadai shel rishon, flows onto the first person's hands, Reuven's hands, ula yadai shel sheni, and then to the hands of the second person, Shimon, shalamata mimenu, whose hands are underneath his hands. Yetei shneim teiros, both of their hands, Reuven's hands and Shimon's hands, are now all going to be tahar. Afal pi, even though shepiches shir haravius, that you have less than a share of a revius, kishe magiyim liyadav shel sheni, when the water hits the second person's hands, Shimon's hands, still yadav tahiros, Shimon's hands are tahar, despite the fact that a revius never hit his hands, because they come from shiarei tahara, they come from the leftover water from the Netillas Yadayim that was already used to bring tahara. And therefore, says the Mechaber, this works. And again, this is based on the Shittas HaRamban. Now, before we see the second opinion, which is going to be Shittas Rashi, let's take a look here at the Mishnah Berurah, who's going to explain this thoroughly. So let's go to Mishnah Berurah's Katan Samach Vav. So the opening salvo of the Mechaber was, Tzarech sheyehi b'mayim revius. You need a revius of water. Why do you need a revius of water? Says the Chavetz Chaim, Shekein tiktu chachamim Netillas Yadayim. That was the Takanas Chazal for the Mitzvah D'Rabbanan of Netillas Yadayim, that you need a revius of mayim. Why? So I explained, because that's the precedent that we have, that a revius of mayim could be considered a mikveh, because you could use a revius of mayim to toivel a tiny keli. Now, what do you do with this revius? Says the Mishnah Berurah. V'shoivcha b'shnei pa'amim al yadav. You're going to take that revius and you're going to pour over your hands twice. Why twice? Says the Chavetz Chaim. T'bapam rishon, with the first pour, Netillas Yadayim. You bring tahara to the hands. With that first pour of water from the revius of mayim, that removes the tumah from the hands, and the hands become tar. But now the tumah is in the water. Ubashniya, and with the second pour, mitar hamayim she'aleihem, you bring tahara to the water, the tameh water that's on the hands from the first pour. Kidal kameh, like we're going to discuss in greater detail in Siman Kuf Samach Beis. But, and this is something that we've mentioned already several times, V'im shafach ha-revius kula b'basakas al shtei yodav. But let's say Levi would come and pour the entire revius on both of Reuven's hands in one shot, one pour, a full revius on both hands, then gam kein netar yodav. That would do the job. Reuven's hands would be fully tar. Af shaloi shafach ala pamachas, even though it was only one pour. Why? The Chamavur b'Siman Kuf Samach Beis, because we've spoken already many times that when you pour a revius b'basakas, the tumah goes puff. The tumah's gone. When you pour less than a revius on the hands, so then the tumah comes off the hand and it goes into the mayim. So now you're left with hands that are tar, but they have tamei mayim on them. So then you need a second pour. But if you pour a full revius on the hands, then the tumah goes puff, the tumah's gone, just like when somebody goes and is toivel in a mikveh. We don't say that the tumah goes off the body and goes into the water in a mikveh, and they have to drain the mikveh. No, you go into a mikveh, the tumah goes tough, puff, but the tumah's gone. So too over here. Says the Chavetz Chaim, V'chol zeh b'makom she'ein mayim mitzuyim. Remember that when we discuss using such a minimal amount of water, that's only when it's hard to come by water. But where there's plenty of water, it's better that you should pour plenty of water. Okay, so again, the opening shot here is that you need a revius. What do you do with the revius? Said the Chavetz Chaim. What you do with the revius is you pour once on the hand, that's matar the hand. Then you pour a second time on the hand in order to be mataher the mayim tmeim that remain on the hand from the first pour. That's what you would do. But if you have Levi available who could pour a full revius on both of your hands in one shot, then really you could do that. And we don't have to worry about a second pour. We don't need a second pour. Because the first pour that had a full revius made the tumah vanish. So now there's no tumah even in the mayim anymore. Okay. Now we go to Ois Katan Samach Zayin. The Mechaber said, this that you need a revius, and that the full revius has to come into contact with the hands, that's only le'echad. That's only true when it's one person who's washing the Netillas Yadayim. Says the Chavetz Chaim, and this that for one person you need the full revius, that's true if a second person is pouring the full revius on both of his hands at one shot, or if Reuven himself is washing one hand at a time, you still only need one revius. One revius is enough for two hands. So even according to the Ramban, that you need a full revius, each one of your hands doesn't need to get a full revius. If you're alone washing and you have a kais that is a revius, you could use a half a revius on one hand and a half of a revius on the other hand. So you can use a quarter of a revius for the first pour on the right hand, a quarter of a revius for the second pour on the right hand, then a quarter of a revius for the first pour on the left hand, and a quarter of a revius for the second pour on the left hand. And that's okay. So you don't need a full revius for each hand. Me, however, but it's kind of like a kula and a chumrah. Even if you only want to wash one of your hands. Now, why would you only want to wash one of your hands? Says the Mishnah Berurah, let's say one of your hands is 100% tar. Maybe you washed for lunch, and then from lunch until supper, you were never misiach das on your left hand. So you know for sure that your left hand is tar. So your left hand is not stam yadayim. Your left hand really doesn't need Netillas Yadayim. It's only your right hand that needs Netillas Yadayim. So now you only want to wash one hand. Could you use half a revius? Says the Mishnah Berurah, no. Gam kein ein livkais b'shir revius. You can't use less than a revius. Why? Because you got to start off with a revius, because that's a mikveh. And he brings this down with the Tosefta. V'nira, and it would seem, says the Mishnah Berurah, mishum sheba kli tzarach revius lo'olam. Because for the Netillas Yadayim from a keli, you always need a revius. The mapakas ain't sheer tara. Because less than a revius, we don't look at it as a mikveh. We don't have a volume of water that could bring about tara. We don't have a precedent for less than a revius of mayim bringing about tara. We can look at if you're down. Aval al yarakas ain't tzarich lishpachai sakula. But if you're gonna wash only one hand, you can have a kais that holds a revius, but you don't have to pour the full revius onto that single hand. You could use only half a revius. Well, the kaman b'sim kosam b'esiv dalit had takti divrei akrayim shekasu di'eshlinik shel lifchais b'shir revius b'ayim l'chol yad v'yad. Lamaisa, the Mishnah Berurah says that later on in Siv kosam b'esiv dalit he's going to bring down the words of the akrayim who say that lamaisa we should be noyeg not to use less than a revius for each hand. Why? Because as we're going to see as we move along, if you wash your hand with a revius, you have less complications in the Netillas Yadayim. Since a revius makes the tumah vanish, you have less complications in Hilchas Netillas Yadayim if you're nizer to always wash with a minimum of a revius. If you have two people shabal litel ke'echad who want to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, right? What does this mean? That they want to wash at the same time? That they had intent from the outset to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time. And therefore, since Reuven and Siman both had, in other words, Reuven, Siman, and Levi are in the park. Reuven and Siman want to eat their two different sandwich. They only have one washing cup and it only has one revius. So they look at each other and they say, oh, you remember we learned in the Dirshu share that two people could wash the Netillas Yadayim for one revius? Yeah, let's go do it. So Reuven and Siman had kavanah mitchila, they had kavanah from the beginning, that they're both going to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time from this one cup. Therefore, since they had kavanah, therefore, even if Siman sticks out his hands under the water after Reuven already started pouring, or after Levi already started pouring, the Netillas Yadayim will work for Siman too. Because Lamaisa, they had kavanah, even though physically he didn't stick out his hand at the same time, he only stuck out his hand after Levi started pouring, or after Reuven started pouring. But since they had kavanah mitchila to wash at the same time, it works. It's as if they're both washing at the same time. And you don't have to worry that Shimon's hands are going to become tamei from the water coming off of Shimon's hands. However, if that wasn't the kavanah, if Reuven knew that he had to wash the Netillas Yadayim, and he asked Levi to pour water over his hands, Reuven went, and he stuck out his hands for Levi. Levi, started pouring on Reuven's hands, and Shimon came and said, "Oh, me too." So now there was no kavanah mitchila for Reuven and Shimon to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time. In that case, Shimon is a Johnny come lately, or a Shimon come lately. In that case, says the Mishnah Berurah, now we look at it as if Shimon is trying to wash Netillas Yadayim with used Netillas Yadayim water from Reuven, which we said doesn't work. But also like Netila, and that won't work. Why won't it work? First of all, because the mayim coming off of Shimon's hands is tamei. Second of all, because it's mayim shenasa by malacha, because Reuven already washed with it. V'tzarek l'nagiv yadav. In that case, Shimon would have to dry his hands, v'lachs of a liter, and then go wash again. Kittel kamam b'simin kuf samach beis sif dalad. He's cut in samach tes. Ha'achrain einoy tzarech. The second one does not need a volume of a revius to reach his hands. But you do have to have enough water that will cover all the parts of his hand that must be washed. This works. What does zakar mean? It doesn't mean that Shimon is washing after Reuven washes. No. What the Mechaber wants to say is, not only does it work if Reuven and Shimon both stuck out their hands at the same time and then Levi poured over them, not only does that work, also like Netila. If Reuven and Shimon had kavanah to wash at the same time, then even if Levi started to pour on Reuven's hands, and only after Reuven started to pour, Shimon went and stuck his hands in, it still works. Why? Since they both had kavanah to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, the chanal, ayin aleph, as long as the flow from the cup didn't stop before Shimon stuck out his hands. Since Levi is still pouring, so you've got the water in the cup, the nitzik, the flow, the stream from the cup, then you've got Reuven's hands and the water on Reuven's hands, and then you've got the water flowing down to Shimon, going on to Shimon's hands. It's all connected. So since it's all connected, and Reuven and Shimon had kavanah to wash the Netillas Yadayim at the same time, it's as if Shimon is washing from a full revius. Umipnei shabar mamayim mishiyurei tahara heikelu zeh lakshav kedeitel revius ayidei chibra nitzuk. Since this is shiyarei tahara, we have a kula, and it's as if Shimon is washing from a revius. Ice cut nayin beis. Another caveat that the Mechaber said was that the hands have to be samuch. They have to be close. Does chashbiran kiarachas. Because then we look at it all as one. Avo b'miruchakim. But if Reuven's hands are up here and Shimon's hands are down here, far away, then it doesn't work. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Avo b'miruchakim hevi kamay noitel b'mei rechitzas chaveroi. Then we look at it as if Shimon is washing from used Netillas Yadayim water. Okay? I thought that we were going to be able to do the second opinion today as well, and I see that I just can't. But I just want to give a synopsis of what we just learned over here. So again, for the Netillas Yadayim, you need a revius. You need a keli that can hold a revius. You need a revius of mayim in the keli. Why? Because a revius of mayim has a din mikveh. We have a precedent that a revius of mayim could bring tahara to a tiny keli in the context of tfilas kelim. So Revius of Mayim has a shtickle adin mikveh. So for the Netillas Yadayim, you need a minimum of a shear of a Revius. Shitas Haramban, and the first sheet to here in the Shulchan Aruch that we learned today, the full Revius has to hit the hands. However, says the Mechaber, that's only true when one person is washing. If two people want to wash at the same time, what does that mean? That means that they had kavanah. They had kavanah to wash at the same time. Then you could get a third person to pour one revius of mayim over two people's hands at the same time. They have to keep their hands close to each other. They don't have to stick out their hands mamish at the same time. Reuven could stick out his hands first. Shimon could stick out his hands after. He could stick out his hands second. He could even stick out his hands if the Levi already started pouring. But he has to stick out his hands before the pour stops. Levi still has to be pouring. If Shimon sticks out his hands and the revius of Mayim is going from the cup to Reuven to Shimon, we look at it that it's all connected. All the washing is happening at the same time. Everybody's washing with a revius, and Shimon is not washing from used Netillas Yadayim water. It's not used Netillas Yadayim water. The Netillas Yadayim is happening right now. The Netillas Yadayim of Shimon's hands is happening exactly at the same time as the Netillas Yadayim of Reuven's hands. So it's not used Netillas Yadayim water. What could go wrong? What could go wrong is, first of all, Reuven and Shimon's hands have to be close to each other. Second of all, there has to be kavanah from the outset that they're washing at the same time. If there was no kavanah at the outset, if Levi was pouring water over Reuven's hands, and then Shimon comes running in and says, me too, and sticks his hands in, that doesn't work. Why? Because then we don't look at it, that all the Netillas Yadayim is happening at the same time. No. Reuven was washing Netillas Yadayim. Shimon came and stuck his hands in. Okay, Shimon is getting used Netillas Yadayim water. It's only one Netillas Yadayim if there was kavanah from the outset to make it one Netillas Yadayim. Okay, Mitzvah Hashem, we'll see the second shita based on Shitas Rashi in the next year. Since I'm recording this on Thursday night, I'm going to wish everybody a good Shabbos. Mitzvah Hashem, we should only hear Basuris Tovos. The schus of limud HaTorah should be made on Skans Klal Yisrael. And boy, there are lots of those who really, really need it. We won't need it every day. We won't need it every second and every minute. But now we know that we have Yidden that are mamish in harm's way. So they need all the schusim they can get, Rabbi Say. We should be machzik in limud HaTorah. We should keep them in our tefillas. We should be mispal constantly. The schus of limud HaTorah should be made on Skans Klal Yisrael. The Rabbi should say Yeshua Sefurus Parnas and Shidduchim to all those in need. We should be zeicher to see the Biaska El Tzedek B'meher V'Yameinu Amen. Be well.